Two little girls boarded a plane alone. No parent, no guardian, just a crumpled boarding pass and a backpack full of silence. They sat in row 28, quiet, hungry, invisible. In seat 1A sat Julian West, billionaire, CEO, alone by choice. He didn't believe in second chances. He didn't believe in children. But something made him look twice. Why were these girls flying across the country by themselves? Why did one of them flinch when someone offered help? And when they landed, why wasn't anyone waiting? What happens when a man who's built walls? His entire life meets two sisters who've only known abandonment. And this is not just a story about wealth. It's a story about responsibility, memory, and the quiet, unspoken moments that can change everything. Stay with us as we uncover the mystery behind their mother's disappearance and the life-altering choice Julian West never planned to make. Hit like if you've ever felt invisible. Subscribe for more emotional, true-life stories. And share this story with someone who still believes in chosen family. Now, let's begin. Julian West didn't like flying. Not because he feared turbulence or hated recycled air. He owned the jet engines powering half the routes across the East Coast. He disliked flying because it trapped him, trapped his thoughts, trapped him with people. And Julian West wasn't good with people. Not anymore. He adjusted the cuff of his tailored navy suit, glanced at the time 6:48 p.m., and settled into seat 1A of the red eye from Los Angeles to New York. Window seat, always, private, predictable, just the way he liked it. The hum of the engines rising, the clink of crystal glasses from the pre-departure drinks in first class. A whisper of nervous laughter from row 3. He closed his eyes briefly and leaned his head against the leather. The scent of lavender disinfectant, freshly vacuumed carpet, and distant coffee mixed into something almost sterile. He preferred it that way. Clean, clear, contained. Then something disrupted it. A voice, sharp, frazzled, just past the curtain, dividing first class from coach. We need to keep the aisles clear. Girls, sit tight now. Your mom's not here. You're traveling alone. Remember, he opened one eye, not curiosity reflex. The flight attendant's voice was hushed, but edged with something brittle. Not annoyance, worry. He tilted his head slightly, catching a glimpse through the parted curtain. Just shadows, movement, a small pink backpack. Two figures shifting into seats toward the back. Children? Julian looked back out the window. Stars over the wing. The tarmac lights flashing in a tired rhythm. It wasn't his business. Across the aisle, a businessman in a gray blazer was complaining about peanuts. Typical. Julian ignored him. He always ignored the noise. But then he caught another glimpse, this time in the polished metal reflection of the overhead compartment. A little girl's face, round cheeks, pale, wide eyes that weren't crying, but something about them. He shook it off. You've seen thousands of kids on flights. Julian, don't make this about you. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out the latest quarterly report from West Axis Logistics, and tried to focus on freight trends, but the words blurred on the page. 30 minutes later, they were in the air. Altitude 33, no on feet. The cabin lights dimmed. First class cocooned itself in silence. Noise-canceling headphones, reclining beds, luxury blankets. Julian remained upright, hands folded, eyes closed, but not asleep. That voice again. Excuse me, miss. Can my sister have some water? It was faint, behind him, but the softness of the question struck something old and buried. He didn't turn around, didn't need to. He remembered asking that same question once, at a shelter in downtown Denver. When the night had turned too cold and the adults stopped answering, he had asked, not because he thought they'd say yes, but because his little brother needed something to believe in. The flight attendant returned to first class. She walked past him briskly, but her face looked unsettled. Julian opened his eyes again. "Everything all right?" he asked. The attendant, surprised to be addressed, paused. "Two unaccompanied minors in coach," she said quietly. "No parent. Just a number on a napkin. Their tickets were booked yesterday. Cheapest fare." Julian raised a brow. "How old? Maybe 8, 9. "They're twins," she exhaled. "It just doesn't sit right. But protocol is protocol." He nodded. Didn't ask more. Didn't offer more. The attendant moved on. Julian turned his head, staring out into the dark, silent sky. He tried to go back to the report, to numbers, trends, margins, but his mind had detached, and the airplane felt colder than usual. Because now, every time he closed his eyes, he didn't see spreadsheets. He saw a little girl in row 28, asking for water, for her sister, and waiting, not panicking, not sobbing, just waiting, as if waiting itself was the only thing they'd ever learned how to do. Julian West didn't normally walk through coach. He'd built a life specifically designed to avoid it, chauffeured SUVs, private terminals, hotel penthouses that whisked him in through side elevators. He hadn't stood in a public line in 15 years. But when he got up to stretch his legs and headed toward the restroom in the rear, something pulled him further. Maybe it was restlessness. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe if he was honest, it was something closer to recognition. He passed rows filled with exhausted families, flickering seatback screens, arms tangled in thin blankets. The further he went, the colder the air felt, as if the pressurized comfort of first class couldn't stretch this far. Then he saw them. Row 28, 2 small figures, side by side, unmoving. The girl nearest the aisle had a mop of tangled curls and a plastic barrette shaped like a sunflower. Her knees were pulled to her chest. She clutched a crumpled napkin with both hands like it was made of gold. The other girl sat rigid, hands folded in her lap, her face angled toward the window. Pale blue hoodie, mismatched socks, no shoes. Julian slowed his steps. Neither noticed him. They weren't looking for attention. They weren't fidgeting or giggling like kids usually did on planes. They were still alert, like they were holding their breath. He stepped back toward the galley, where a junior flight attendant stood sipping lukewarm coffee. "The girls in 28. Julian said quietly, "Do you know where they're headed?" She blinked, startled. "Newark. Final destination." He hesitated. "They have someone meeting them." She shrugged. "There's a number, but we've called it 3 times. No response." He nodded once. "Thank you." She didn't ask who he was. Julian carried that kind of presence, the kind that said, "You already know." Back at his seat in first class, Julian didn't pick up his report. Instead, he stared blankly at the little dish of mixed nuts the attendant had placed beside his drink. He thought of their posture, of the absolute quiet that wrapped around them like a second skin. He thought of the girl at the window, the one who didn't blink. There was something in her eyes that chilled him. Not because it was sad, because it was familiar. 20 minutes passed. Julian asked for a glass of water. When the attendant returned, he didn't drink it. "Have they eaten?" he asked. "The girl," she clarified. He nodded. "I offered snacks. The younger one, Ari, I think took half a granola bar. Said they didn't want to take too much." He let that sit in the air. Too much of what he asked softly. The attendant didn't have an answer. Julian rose again. Slowly, silently. This time, he walked back with purpose. Row 28 was quieter now. A few nearby passengers were asleep. The overhead lights dimmed. He approached gently, crouched beside the aisle seat. The girl with the sunflower beret Ari looked up, eyes wide, surprised, but not afraid. "Hi," Julian said calmly. "I'm Julian. I just wanted to check if you were okay." Ari blinked, beside her. The other girl, Isla, turned slowly. No emotion, no reaction, just those steady, unblinking eyes. Ari answered first. "We're fine. We're going to Newark." Julian nodded. "That's a long way. Do you fly often?" Ari shook her head. Isla didn't speak. Julian lowered his voice. "Did someone help you get on board our mom?" Ari said. "She gave us the ticket and the napkin." She opened her fist and showed it to him. A faded napkin from a fast food restaurant. On it, a name and number written in blue pen. Julian looked at it. The ink had smudged. The number wasn't even complete. He felt something twist in his stomach. "I think we're supposed to call when we land," Ari offered. "But my sister said maybe it's not a working phone." Julian looked at Isla, still silent, still watching. He lowered his voice further. "What's your name, Ari?" "And she's Isla." "How old are you?" "We're 8. Julian felt that twist again. 8. Alone. On a cross-country flight. "And where's your mom now?" he asked gently. Ari's voice shrank. "She said she had to go take care of something. But she told us we'd be okay." "And are you?" he asked. Isla spoke for the first time. "We're used to not taking up space." The words hit like a quiet punch. Julian didn't know what to say. He wasn't good with kids. He didn't want to intrude, but something in Isla's tone flat, practiced, made him stay a moment longer. He pulled out a small travel pack of almonds from his jacket and handed it to Ari. She looked to Isla for approval. Isla gave a small nod. Ari took it. "Quiet, thanks. I'll be a few rows ahead." Julian said, "Let the flight crew know if you need anything." As he walked away, Isla's eyes followed him. Not with hope, not with expectation, just tracking, like she was memorizing the exit. Back in seat 1A, Julian sat in the dark with his thoughts. The engines hummed. The stars remained fixed. But something inside him had started to shift. And he couldn't help but wonder, how long had they been trained to disappear? Julian West hadn't thought about that bench in years. The one with the chipped green paint and the wobbly leg. The one that sat across from the locked office at St. Bridget's Shelter, where they told him, "Just wait here. Julian, your mother will be back soon." He was 9. She never returned, and yet he waited. That day, the next, and the next. Long after the sandwiches stopped coming. Long after they gave his bed to someone else. He kept waiting, not because he believed, but because stopping meant admitting she had already decided. Now, 32,000 feet above Kansas. Julian's fingers were curled around the same kind of silence. He saw it in Isla's eyes. Not fear, not confusion, resignation. The kind that only comes from children who've already understood what abandonment means, and know better than to speak it aloud. He leaned forward in his seat, tried to read the same quarterly report for the 3rd time. Profit margins, fuel costs, international tariffs. But his mind kept drifting. Back to the napkin, to Ari's carefully controlled voice, to Isla's eerie calm. "We're used to not taking up space." That sentence wouldn't leave him. He turned to look out the window. The clouds below glowed pale blue under the moonlight. The wing dipped slightly. Julian pressed 2 fingers to his temple. Why am I doing this? Why can't I let it go? He could hear his old therapist's voice years ago, in a minimalist office that smelled like mint and damp carpet. You never needed closure. You needed proof that someone would choose to stay. Julian had built an empire instead. Logistics, freight, routes that never delayed, deliveries that always arrived. It was how he proved he could be relied on. But reliability and love are not the same thing. The lead flight attendant, Renee, appeared at his seat. "Mr. West," she said cautiously. "We just try that number again. The one on the napkin." Julian looked up. Renee shook her head. "Out of service." He nodded once. "Thank you." She didn't leave. "Sir?" Her voice lowered. "Are you a family member?" "The girls know," Julian interrupted. She hesitated. "It's just, they're so calm. Too calm." Julian looked down at his glass. The ice had melted. When she left, he stood again, walked back. This time, he didn't bother pretending it was for the restroom. He stopped beside row 28 and crouched again. Ari looked up immediately. "You came back," she said. It wasn't a question, more like a quiet surprise. Julian nodded. "You girls doing okay?" Ari shrugged. "We're okay." Isla didn't speak. Julian glanced at her. This time, she met his eyes. And for a split second less than that, he saw it. Not the quiet, not the calm, but the tiny flicker behind her stare, the part of her that hadn't yet given up. And it hurt, because it looked exactly like 9-year-old Julian, still sitting on a bench in Denver, still believing maybe the next hour would be different. "Do you want anything?" he asked. "Juice snacks." Ari shook her head. "We don't want to take too much. The lady already gave us cookies." Julian paused. "Taking up space doesn't make you a burden." Ari blinked. Isla slowly turned her head to the side, as if trying to make sense of what he'd just said. Julian gently asked, "Can I sit here? Just for a few minutes?" Ari looked to Isla. "For the first time." Isla gave the faintest nod. Julian slid into the empty seat across the aisle, the one next to the emergency exit door. The hum of the plane pressed in around them. "I had a brother," Julian said quietly. "I used to look out for him like that. The way you look out for your sister." Ari smiled, small and tired. "He younger?" she asked. Julian nodded. "Where is he now?" Julian looked out at the wing, the clouds beyond. "I don't know," he said softly. "We got separated in the system." Ari blinked, unsure what to say. Isla finally whispered, "I'm sorry." Julian met her eyes again, and that tiny flicker inside her had grown. Barely, but enough. They sat like that in silence for a while. 3 strangers, 2 children who'd been left behind, 1 man who never stopped waiting. At some point, Ari leaned her head on Isla's shoulder, her eyes heavy. Isla stayed upright, watchful. Julian didn't speak again, but before he stood, he reached into his pocket, took out a small square of folded paper, a hotel stationery note he kept with him. He wrote his name, his number, and folded it once more. He set it gently on the seat tray between them. "If you ever need to talk to someone after we land," he said, "I'll answer." Isla looked at it, didn't move, didn't touch it. But when Julian walked away, she pulled it into her hoodie pocket without a word. Back in seat 1A. Julian exhaled deeply, a long, shaky breath. He stared ahead at the empty sky and felt something inside him that hadn't stirred in years. Not pity, not rescue, just this, recognition. The captain's voice crackled overhead just as Julian West returned to his seat. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just passed over Missouri. Smooth skies ahead. Estimated arrival in New York is 6:12 a.m. Julian barely heard it. His thoughts were stuck somewhere at 32,000 feet. Somewhere between row 28 and the ache in his chest that wouldn't go away. He hadn't planned this. He'd booked this flight the way he did everything else in life clean. Predictable, non-negotiable. Seat 1A, non-stop, in, out. No variables. Now, there were two, and they were both under 4 feet tall, a few rows back. Ari had fallen asleep. Isla hadn't. She was watching the dark sky outside, but her shoulders were stiff, her chin slightly raised, her fingers clutching Julian's note like a secret she didn't know whether to believe. Renee, the senior flight attendant, noticed. She walked past slowly, paused, then quietly doubled back. She crouched beside their seats and gently touched Isla's elbow. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" she asked. Isla nodded, but said nothing. Renee glanced at Ari, then back at her. "Is there anything you need?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "We're just trying not to be forgotten." Renee froze. It was the way she said it. No drama, no tears, just fact. Like it was a language she'd learned. Like it was survival. In first class. Julian sipped lukewarm coffee that tasted like metal and regret. He was staring blankly ahead when Renee appeared beside him. She didn't speak right away. Just placed a hand on the seat in front of him, steadying herself in the gentle turbulence. "She said," Renee whispered, "they're just trying not to be forgotten." Julian closed his eyes. That same sentence, twice, from different mouths. He let the words settle in his chest, where they burned. Renee continued, "I checked the manifest again. The tickets were booked under the name Charlotte Monroe. Purchased yesterday. Basic economy. No luggage. No unaccompanied minor form. Just 2 children dropped at the curb." Julian opened his eyes. "And no one has answered the phone number. It's not even registered. The number on the napkin disconnected. I called 3 different state agencies. Nothing." He exhaled. "Are we required to notify authorities when we land?" Renee nodded. "I already filed an alert. Standard protocol when unaccompanied minors are at risk." Julian looked out the window. "And what happens then? They'll be taken by child services, overnight in a holding facility, then likely into temporary foster care." Julian swallowed. "At 8 years old." Renee folded her arms. "They'll be split up," she added quietly. "That's how the system works." Julian's breath caught in his throat. He didn't respond. She didn't press him, but before she left, she said one more thing. "They don't look like they've had anyone in their corner for a long time." 45 minutes later, the cabin lights flickered. A faint ding signaled turbulence ahead. Then it hit. A hard jolt. Then another. Passengers gasped. Someone screamed in the back. The fastened seatbelt sign glowed red. Julian remained calm. Years of travel had trained him to breathe through dips and shudders. This wasn't dangerous. But then he heard it. A single, sharp cry. Then another. He knew that voice. Ari. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The plane dipped again. A flight attendant reached to stop him.
"Sir, please remain seated." But Julian was already moving down the aisle, balancing himself against the seats. When he reached row 28, both girls were curled into each other. Ari was crying softly, her face buried in Isla's hoodie. Isla's lips were pressed tight. Her hand trembled as she gripped her sister's arm, trying to hold her together.
Julian crouched, ignoring the shaking cabin. He placed a steady hand on the seat in front of them.
"I'm here," he said gently. "It's okay. You're safe."
Ari peeked through her curls, eyes wide with panic.
"I want my mom," she whispered. "Julian didn't move. I know."
Isla whispered something he didn't catch.
"He leaned in. She said,"
Isla murmured, "Mom promised the plane would be safe. But the sky's not keeping the promise. That nearly broke him, because he remembered saying that exact sentence to his brother once on a bus, not a plane, on a night that turned violent. He'd whispered, 'The shelter man promised we'd be okay.' And they weren't. He couldn't go back and save his brother. But he was here now." Julian reached into the seat pocket and pulled out the blanket. He unfolded it, wrapped it around both girls gently. Then he took off his jacket, an expensive one, hand-stitched, and draped it over their laps. The turbulence eased. The plane steadied. But Julian didn't leave. He sat on the armrest beside them. Ari rested her head on Isla's shoulder again. She whispered, "You're the first grown-up who came back." He didn't know what to say, so he just stayed. When Renee passed by again, she paused. Julian met her eyes. Her expression softened. "Not pity, respect." She whispered, "We'll be landing in 90 minutes. Julian nodded. He looked down at the two girls now sleeping against each other and thought they've been waiting for someone far longer than this flight. Julian West had said it out loud once, at a charity gala. After too much bourbon and too little patience, a senator's wife had asked him when he planned to settle down and start a family. "I don't want children," he'd replied. "I'd rather not risk being someone's disappointment." There'd been awkward laughter, a few nervous chuckles. Someone changed the subject. But Julian remembered the pause in the woman's eyes, the flicker of something like recognition or pity. He never explained himself. He didn't have to. People saw a billionaire bachelor and filled in the blanks with whatever made them feel more comfortable. What they didn't see was the boy who waited at the foster office door every Sunday, just in case someone changed their mind. What they didn't see was the teenager who learned never to speak too softly, because soft things were forgotten. Julian had built walls instead, tall ones, made of flights, meetings, wealth, and silence. Now here he was, sitting beside two sleeping girls in row 28 of a commercial airliner blanket around them, his tailored jacket slipping to the floor, and a sharp pain in his chest he hadn't felt in decades. This wasn't the plan. He wasn't supposed to feel anything. Wasn't supposed to remember that same weight the one Isla carried in her jaw every time she clenched it to hold herself steady. He wasn't supposed to care. And yet, he glanced over. Ari had curled inward now, her thumb tucked beneath her chin. Isla had one arm around her, even in sleep. Protective, instinctive, Julian whispered. "You're not a burden." Neither girl stirred, but he felt the words settle anyway. When he returned to first class, Renee stopped him. "Sir," she said carefully, "Newark Ground Control just confirmed Child Services will be waiting." Julian nodded slowly. "Do they know the situation?" "They've been briefed, but unless someone claims custody or signs temporary guardianship, protocol is separation until further notice." He pressed his tongue to the roof of his mouth. "What happens tonight?" "A holding facility," Renee said. "Standard bunk beds, temporary staff, minimal supervision, no guarantees they'll stay together." Julian's throat tightened. He'd seen those places. Not the modern brochures, but the real rooms. The ones with flickering lights, underpaid staff, and kids teaching other kids how to survive silence. He sat back in 1A, but didn't relax. His mind was spiraling. What if Isla didn't speak up again? What if Ari stopped asking for water? What if he reached for his phone? No signal. He stared at the black screen like it held an answer. Then slowly, his fingers began typing into notes. A name, Charlotte Monroe. 2 daughters, Ari and Isla. Age 8. Flight LAX to EWR. Then he paused, because beneath those facts, he didn't know what to write. He didn't know who to call. For the next hour, Julian didn't sleep. He thought about the paperwork, about guardianship, about consequences. His mind flipped through scenarios like spreadsheets: legal risk, financial risk, reputation. He'd never been reckless, never made a decision based on emotion. But this wasn't emotion. This was recognition. This was memory. This was a boy who used to believe he didn't matter. And now he was looking at 2 girls, perfect strangers, carrying the same weight. He could walk off this flight and do nothing. Or he could stay and try. "Mr. West," Renee said softly as she approached. "We're beginning our descent." Julian glanced out the window. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges. Dawn over New Jersey looked as gray as concrete and just as cold. He nodded once, then looked up at her. "What would I need to do?" he said slowly. "If I wanted to be the person who meets them." Renee blinked. "You mean you'd take custody?" "No," he said, then added, "Quieter. Not yet. I just want them to have a soft place to land. I want them to stay together tonight. No holding facility, no separate beds." She swallowed. "There's a temporary sponsor program, but it takes paperwork, usually days." Julian held her gaze. "I'm Julian West." Her eyebrows rose. "As in West Axis Logistics." He didn't smile, just nodded. "Make the call," he said. "Get whoever needs to sign off. If they need a guarantee, give them mine." Renee stared at him. Then, for the first time all night, she smiled. "You may have just saved them from being forgotten." The wheels touched down just after 6:09 a.m. The plane taxied across the tarmac, the sky outside streaked with soft pastels, pale pinks, slate blues, the fragile color palette of a morning that hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be. Julian West sat still in seat 1A, but his heart was moving 1,000 miles an hour. He wasn't nervous. He didn't get nervous, but something was growing in him, an ache that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with responsibility, the kind he'd spent decades avoiding. The announcement came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived in Newark. Please remain seated as we arrive at the gate. A reminder to check your seat backs and carry-ons." Julian barely heard it. He was watching row 28. Ari had stirred but hadn't fully woken. Isla was already upright, watchful, composed, bracing. Even now, the girl didn't flinch. She just waited. Renee approached quietly and handed Julian a manila folder. "Legal draft from airport liaison," she whispered. "Emergency sponsor agreement. Short-term protection. You'll need to speak to the authorities directly." Julian scanned it quickly. His signature. 2 witnesses. He didn't hesitate. Pen to paper, ink to promise. 10 minutes later, they began disembarking. Julian walked slowly, not because of age, but because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't walking for himself. He reached row 28 just as the aisle cleared. He knelt beside them once more. "Good morning," he said softly. Ari blinked, rubbed her eyes. "Are we here?" Julian nodded. Isla didn't speak, just stared at the folder in his hand. Julian met her gaze. "I'm going to stay with you until someone finds your mom," he said. "You won't be alone." Isla's lips parted, but she said nothing. Ari looked at her sister. then at Julian. "You promise?" He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Yes, I promise." The terminal felt like another world. Bright white floors, glass everywhere, security officers in neon vests, cold air, echoes. Julian kept the girls close. Renee walked beside them, steady, guiding. At the far end of the concourse, a uniformed woman in a navy blazer stood beside two agents. Clipboard, sunglasses, government face. "Mr. West," she said. "I'm with the Department of Family Services. We received notice about the unaccompanied minors." Julian stepped forward. "I've signed the emergency sponsor form," he said, handing over the folder. "They stay with me." She glanced at the form, then at the girls. "Where's the mother?" she asked. "We don't know." Last known address, Julian shook his head. The agent's jaw tightened. "We can't allow an unverified civilian to assume guardianship without a proper background check, especially not with no parental contact." Renee stepped in. "With respect, this man is Julian West." The agent didn't blink. "We've had senators walk in here. That's not the issue." Julian's voice was quiet but firm. "I'm not asking for permanent custody. I'm offering a safe place until the system catches up. Tonight. That's all." The agent turned back to the girls, and this time Isla spoke. "Our mom said she'd be right back. She gave us money for snacks and told us not to cry in public." The woman nodded. "Do you know where she went?" Isla stared at her. "Then she said we were brave enough to sleep alone if we had to." The agent stilled. It was the way Isla said it, like she already understood the word abandonment without needing it defined. Ari's lip trembled. She said she'd meet us at the end of the flight, but she never got on." The agent lowered her clipboard slowly. Julian didn't speak. He didn't need to. The truth hung there in the air, like morning frost. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a lost phone. This was a choice, and both girls knew it. The agent finally spoke again. Temporary custody, 48 hours, mandatory home inspection, daily welfare check. Julian nodded. The girls didn't look surprised, only tired. 15 minutes later, they were through security. Renee handed Julian a small bag with the girls' granola bars, a phone charger, and the napkin, the one with the smudged number. "Thank you," she whispered. Julian met her eyes. "No," he said. "Thank you for not looking away." She smiled. Then she knelt in front of Ari. "Take care of your sister," she said softly. "I always do," Ari whispered. And then they were gone. Outside. Julian's car waited at the curb. Black SUV. Windows tinted. Driver silent. But when the door opened and the girl stepped in beside him, something changed. Not the world. Not yet. But Julian. He looked at Isla, at the way her hands still trembled beneath her sleeves, even when her face didn't. Then at Ari, who clutched her sister's side like a life jacket. And he thought about what Isla had said. She said we were brave enough to sleep alone if we had to. But children weren't supposed to be brave alone. They were supposed to be held. He didn't speak on the ride, but when they pulled up to his townhouse, he got out first, opened the door for them, and said, "You don't have to sleep alone anymore." Isla didn't move. Ari didn't either. Then slowly, hesitantly, they stepped out. And for the first time in hours, Isla reached for his hand. She didn't look at him, but she held on. Tight. Julian West's townhouse was quiet. Too quiet. Not like the plane. Not like the airport. Not like the subway stations or emergency shelters where noise was constant, where silence meant something had gone wrong. This silence felt sterile. The girls stood in the front hallway, like they were waiting for permission to exist. Ari clutched her backpack tightly. Isla scanned the room, not with curiosity, but with the trained eyes of someone used to identifying exits. Julian stepped inside behind them and set the keys down. The floor creaked. The air smelled like cedar and something faintly citrus. "This is your home tonight," he said gently. "You're safe here." Neither spoke. He motioned toward the wide staircase. "You can pick whichever room you want upstairs, or stay in the guest room together." Ari blinked. Together. Julian nodded. Of course. He showed them the guest room queen-size bed, soft blankets, pale blue wallpaper, a large window with blackout curtains, a nightlight already plugged in. There were plush towels folded on the chair, toothbrushes still in the wrapper, 2 robes still in dry cleaner plastic. Julian had told his housekeeper to prepare it like someone important was coming. He hadn't expected that someone to be 2 children. He stood in the doorway, unsure what came next. Did he leave? Did he say goodnight? He cleared his throat. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything," he said. Ari nodded. "Thank you." Isla still hadn't spoken, but she watched him the whole time. Downstairs. Julian poured himself a glass of water. He didn't drink, just held it. He wasn't used to stillness feeling so loud. An hour passed, then another. He checked the hallway 3 times, listened, no sound, then saw footsteps. He turned. Ari stood there, her hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands. "Can I ask you something?" Julian nodded. "Of course." She looked up. "Why are you helping us? Most grown-ups don't even look at us." The question didn't come with suspicion. It came with exhaustion. Julian sat on the couch and motioned for her to sit too. She did, cautiously. He thought for a long time before answering. "Because I remember what it feels like to wait for someone who never comes back." Ari was quiet. "Were you alone too?" He nodded. "A long time ago." She didn't press. She just said, "Thank you for not looking away." Later, after she went back upstairs, Julian stood outside the guest room door. He didn't knock, but through the wood, he could hear Isla's voice, barely above a whisper. "Do you think he's real? He doesn't smell like the shelters. He has warm lights." Ari mumbled something, then quiet. Julian closed his eyes and walked away. At 2:13, he heard crying. Not loud, not wild, just a soft, shaking sob. He climbed the stairs, barefoot. The guest room door was slightly ajar. He knocked once. "Everything okay?" No response. He opened it gently. Ari was asleep, but Isla was sitting upright, her knees to her chest, tears silently running down her face. Julian froze. He didn't want to startle her. He crouched low. "Can I come in?" She didn't answer, but she didn't say no. He walked in slowly, sat on the floor near the bed. She wiped her face. "Sorry." Julian shook his head. "You don't have to be. I didn't want to cry here." "Why not? Because this place is too nice." She looked around the room. Her voice cracked. "If we cry in nice places, we don't get invited back." Julian looked at her, the truth of her life unraveling in a single sentence. "You don't have to earn this," he said. "You don't have to be quiet or clean or small to stay." She stared at him. "We're always small." He reached out gently, just enough to offer his hand. "You don't have to be. Not here." For the first time, Isla took it, just for a moment, but it was enough. He tucked the blanket back around her, turned off the lamp, And as he stood to leave, she whispered one more thing. She promised we'd be okay. Julian paused in the doorway. His voice was soft. That's one promise I plan to keep for you now. Downstairs. He sat on the couch until morning, not because he was afraid they'd leave, but because he knew if he slept, the reality of what came next might slip through his fingers. And for once, he wasn't willing to lose something he hadn't even named yet. The call came at 9:17 a.m. Julian was in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to make pancakes without looking like he'd Googled every step. The girls were still upstairs. He hadn't woken them. He was halfway through scrambling eggs when his phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number, New Jersey area code. He answered immediately. Mr. West. This is Officer Darnell from the Newark Department of Family Services. I'm calling regarding the Monroe case. Julian dropped the whisk into the bowl. Yes. Go on. A pause. We located the woman who booked the ticket. Charlotte Monroe. Julian's pulse quickened. Is she all right? She's physically unharmed, but she's currently in custody at a facility in Newark for violating a protective order. There are signs of long-term instability. Julian gripped the edge of the counter. Instability, as in, she has a documented history of opioid abuse and abandonment. According to airport surveillance, she left the girls at LAX, walked out of the terminal, and boarded a Greyhound bus to Las Vegas. She left no message, no plan to return. The silence in Julian's kitchen grew heavy. I see, he said finally. Do the girls know? No, sir. That will be your call. But it must be disclosed before any further guardianship decision. He hung up and stood there for a long time, the egg mixture now cold, the pancakes forgotten. His hands curled slowly into fists, not in rage, but in something quieter, sadder, and heavier. Grief, not for himself, for them. Upstairs, Isla was already awake. She sat on the window seat, knees pulled to her chest, staring out at the gray garden below. Julian knocked lightly, then entered. She didn't look at him, but she spoke first. That phone call was about her. He nodded slowly. Yes. She didn't flinch. She's not coming back. Is she? It wasn't a question. It was a dare. To lie. To sugarcoat. To disappoint. Julian sat beside her on the window bench. They found her. But she's not in a place where she can take care of you. Or Ari. Isla's lips tightened. She turned her face away. Toward the window. I knew. Julian looked at her. You did. She nodded. She hugged Ari tighter than me. That's how I knew. She always hugs Ari more when she's about to leave. Julian's breath caught. She said it was just a trip to the bathroom, but she left her bag. She never does that. Isla was unraveling now emotionally, verbally, because silence had never protected her. I wanted to tell Ari. I almost did. But I didn't want her to cry on the plane. She cries too hard. And when she cries, people move away. Julian reached for her hand. I wouldn't have. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away. In the kitchen, Ari had wandered in. Julian found her sitting on a stool, her hands on the counter. Are the pancakes ready? She asked, rubbing her eyes. He smiled. They're getting there. She tilted her head. You look sad. Julian exhaled. I have to tell you something. About your mom. Ari stiffened, then nodded. He crouched beside her, eye level. She's safe, but she's not coming today or tomorrow. Ari blinked hard. Did we do something wrong? Julian shook his head. Never. Did she forget the gate? Or the day? No. Then why Julian hesitated, then spoke plainly. Sometimes people are hurting so badly, they forget how to take care of others, even the people they love, Ari whispered. But I still love her. Julian's voice broke. That doesn't have to change. Love doesn't always disappear when people leave. It just changes shape. She didn't cry. She just sat very still and said, "Okay." Later that day, a caseworker arrived for the home inspection. She wore a red scarf and carried a clipboard, but she didn't expect what she found. 2 girls freshly showered, sitting side by side at the dining table, solving a puzzle together. A CEO in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt watching YouTube tutorials on how to braid hair. An air of calm so delicate it felt like breaking glass to interrupt. She finished the inspection in under 30 minutes. On the way out, she whispered, "They've never looked this regulated on arrival. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Julian nodded, but he didn't smile, because this wasn't success. This was triage. That night, the girls didn't ask for bedtime stories, but they both requested the lamp stay on. Julian sat in the hallway until they fell asleep. Then he walked downstairs and opened a locked drawer in his study. Inside was a photo. 2 boys, a shelter in Denver. One smiling, one quiet. Julian was the quiet one. The other boy, his younger brother, was the smile. Until one night, the system split them up, and he never saw that smile again. He stared at the photo for a long time. Then he whispered, "I couldn't save you." He looked toward the staircase, where 2 sets of small footsteps now climbed freely without fear. "But I won't fail them." The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Plain white, no return address. Just the names written in block letters with a blue pen. Ari and Isla Monroe, C.O. Julian West, 58 Willow Bend Terrace, Hoboken. N.J. Julian didn't open it. He turned it over twice in his hand. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sharp, rushed, but legible. It was hers. Charlotte. He hesitated, then walked upstairs. The envelope still unopened, and knocked on the guest room door. Isla answered, "Not Ari." That alone told him enough. They sat at the kitchen table. Ari picked nervously at the hem of her shirt. Idla just stared at the envelope. "You don't have to read it," Julian said gently. "Did she write it before or after Isla asked?" He paused. "I don't know." Isla reached for the letter with steady fingers. Ari leaned into her shoulder. Together. They opened it. Inside was a single sheet. A few lines. Folded carefully. Isla and Ari. "I know you're mad. You have a right to be. I wasn't strong enough. I wanted to be. But wanting doesn't make the pain go away. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I thought you'd have a better chance without me." He seemed kind. The man in seat 1A. I didn't know his name, but I hoped. "I'm sorry." Mom Ari's lower lip trembled. "She saw you," she whispered to Julian. Julian's heart caught. He read the note again. He imagined Charlotte at the gate, scanning the cabin, seeing him, and choosing to walk away, not just from them, but toward a hope she had no right to gamble, and yet she had gambled it anyway. Isla folded the letter again. "She always said she wasn't good at staying," Ari murmured, "but she left us, with you." They were quiet. Julian didn't interrupt. Then Isla looked up, voice barely audible. "Do you think people can love you and still leave?" Julian met her eyes. "I think some people leave because they love you and think they're the problem." Is she Julian didn't lie. "Yes," then added, "but love doesn't always disappear when people fail. It gets buried, it twists, but sometimes it survives anyway." Ari asked. "Will we ever see her again?" Julian didn't know the answer. Maybe, but only if she gets help. And even then it has to be safe. For both of you. They nodded. No tears. Just a quiet acceptance. The kind no child should have to master. That night, Julian placed the letter in a small wooden box and let the girls choose where to keep it. Ari placed it on the bookshelf in their room between a storybook and a framed photo Julian had taken of them in the park 2 days ago. He didn't realize until later that this was their first photo together, not as temporary passengers, not as stranded souls, as something resembling a family. That same evening, Julian received a call. It was short, direct, from the Department of Family Services. "Mr. West, we've reviewed your application for temporary guardianship." He tensed. "And we've fast-tracked approval. You're officially designated as emergency foster guardian for the Monroe twins." "Congratulations." Julian exhaled slowly. He didn't smile. Not exactly, but something in his chest softened. Upstairs, the girls were already asleep. He peeked in on them as he always did now. Ari had her arm around Isla. Isla's hand rested on a pillow, curled toward the light. The wooden box with Charlotte's letter glowed softly from the shelf. Julian stood there in the doorway for a long time. Then he whispered, not to them, but to the space around them. "You were wrong, Charlotte. You thought leaving would free them, but all it did was give them one more reason to feel disposable. They aren't, and I won't let them think that again." Later, he sat in his study, a notebook open, a fresh page. At the top, he wrote, "Things I never said to my brother." Then underneath, "I missed you every birthday." I didn't forget the green shoelaces. I became someone no one could leave. But I still feel left sometimes. I won't let these girls feel that too. He closed the notebook, not because he was done writing, but because some truths were better lived than written. 6 months later, they were flying again. Same airline, same route, different everything. Julian West stood in Terminal B with 2 small carry-ons, one stuffed plush unicorn peeking out the top, and a boarding pass that read passenger name Isla Monroe, Seat 1. He smiled when he saw it. Ari tugged on his coat sleeve. "Are we late?" Julian knelt to her level. "Nope. We're early. Just like you like it." She grinned. Early means more ginger ale. Isla walked a step behind. Older now, not by age, but by life. She held a book under one arm and a journal tucked beneath the other. Julian carried their passports. All 3 bore the same address now. The gate agent greeted them with a smile. Heading to California, Julian nodded. "A vacation. Our first." The woman looked at the girls, then at Julian. "You've got your hands full." Julian's voice was calm. "They're not full. Just finally, not empty." As they boarded, Ari ran ahead. The moment she saw the cabin, she gasped. "It's the same plane." Julian smiled. Probably not the exact one, but close. Isla stopped in the aisle. She looked at row 28, then back at seat 1A. Julian saw her hesitate. "Is it okay if I sit there again?" she asked softly. "Of course," he said. "It's yours now." She didn't move for a second. Then she slipped into the seat, the same one where she had once hidden her pain so deeply she didn't know it had a name. Now. She looked out the window, her fingers tapping gently against the glass. Ari climbed into the seat beside her. Julian sat across the aisle. The plane filled. Passengers murmured. The world spun on. But inside those few rows, time slowed. Ari whispered something. Isla smiled. Just barely. Julian closed his eyes. He remembered the first time he saw them, shivering, silent, folded into themselves, and now they were coloring boarding passes with glitter pens and laughing about ginger ale. The flight attendant came by with drinks. Julian asked for coffee. Ari asked for extra napkins. She wanted to draw a map of all the places they would go someday. Isla asked for nothing. But when the woman handed her a small pack of cookies, she didn't push it away this time. She whispered, "Thank you." Julian watched her, then turned his gaze toward the clouds. Halfway through the flight, a passenger across the aisle leaned toward Julian. "You're traveling with your daughters?" she asked. He opened his mouth, paused, then nodded. "Yes, my daughters." He said it without hesitation, without disclaimers, without footnotes, just truth. Later, as they descended into LAX, Ari leaned into Julian's arm and whispered, "Do you remember when we didn't know you?" He nodded. "It feels like forever ago." She nodded too, then added, "I like forever better." The wheels touched down. The plane slowed. The seatbelt sign chimed. Julian reached over and squeezed Isla's hand once. She didn't pull away. Instead, she said, "I think seat 1A is lucky." He smiled. "It is now." They exited into sunlight. Los Angeles had that bright, blinding kind of sky that made people squint even when they weren't looking directly at the sun. A car waited for them this time. A hotel booked. A pool with floaties already requested by Ari the week before. But none of it mattered more than this. They weren't flying alone anymore. At the hotel that night, after too much pool time and just enough room service, Isla pulled out her journal. She opened it to a clean page, then wrote, in neat, determined letters, things I know now. Ginger ale is free on planes. Some people don't leave. Seat 1A is mine. You can love your mom and still live without her. Sometimes forever starts late, but it still counts. Mr. West is just Dad now. We are not invisible. She stared at the list, then closed the book. Julian peeked in just before midnight. Both girls were asleep. Ari had one leg thrown across Isla. The unicorn was under the blanket, half crushed. Julian exhaled slowly. Not because he was tired, because he was whole. The past would always live inside them. Charlotte's letter was still tucked in the wooden box they'd brought in their carry-on. Still folded, still painful. But now, it lived beside a passport, and a new birth certificate, and two little hearts that had been given a second chance. Not because of a system, not because of wealth, but because someone chose not to look away, and because two girls were brave enough to sleep alone, until someone brave enough showed up to stay. Sometimes, the most powerful rescue isn't loud, it's quiet. It's choosing to sit beside someone when they feel disposable. It's noticing the child no one else sees. It's asking the question no one else dares. Are you really okay? Julian West could have stayed in his first-class bubble, but instead, he stood up for two little girls who'd learned far too young how to be small. Ari and Isla didn't need saving. They needed seeing. They needed someone who didn't flinch at their silence or walk away when love got hard. This story reminds us abandonment is never justified, neglect is never love, and no child should have to prove they're worth staying for. If this story moved, you don't let it end here. Hit like if you believe every child deserves a safe seat, whether it's in a home or on a plane. Drop a comment. Have you ever met someone who changed the course of your life quietly? Share this video with someone who still believes in redemption. And subscribe to our channel for more true stories that heal, reveal, and inspire. We'll see you in the next flight.